is my way, but yeah, this will actually be very short. We're not doing much. When we are talking about testing, it's always more of practice than um teaching, right? But at the end of the day, it's essential that we learn it, so that we can have conversations. We don't get lost when our QA is talking or when other people in the organization are actually having conversations. So, what does today we'll be talking about testing and UAT. I remember that the first time I heard the term UAT was 2 years after I became a product manager. Right, I'd never heard about the term before in my life because I was working in a startup all my career. So I'd never heard the term UAT before. It was uh, I and a couple of my friends got an offer to build a product for one of the top Nigeria banks. It's an internal product that they use, and when when we're done building the product, while we're still building the product, the internal consultant, just reached out to us and said, "Hey, Michael, what's the plan for UAT?" I remember that day I was dumbfounded, and I was like, "Okay, you know what I'll do is I've been waiting for you to ask me that question, so I'm just going to work on a uh, documentation and send you how we actually usually do it, right?" The reason why I answered that way is because I actually had no idea. If she was to be listening to this recording now, she'll probably have realized why I said that day. But I froze and I had to just tell her, hey, yes, I've been expecting you to ask that question, but really, I remember that day I answered with so much confidence, like I was actually expecting her. I didn't want to fall. I didn't want to fall in the hands of my guys that were working on the project together. So then I had to go and do research and realize that, okay, this is something I do regularly. This is something I know, right? So why have I never heard about it? So, which is why I'm actually choosing to add this to one of the things that you guys should be learning about. Right. So, what exactly? Let's start on why testing matters, right? One of the reasons why testing matters is because, again, developers can fully be trusted, but at the same time, developers spend most of their time writing code, and sometimes they lose track of what it feels like to be a user. Okay, so I have developers here in the call who have who have been developing before, and that might sound very weird. It's like saying that doctors, they they treat people so much, and over time they forget what it means like to be human, or should I say, yeah, I think doctors makes a lot of sense. That's why you find people like maybe a Proco doctor says, "Oh, once you take this, your life will be better." He says it with so much confidence, like, "Okay, if I take enough water in the day, then I will be fine." And he forgets the fact that someone you have to work all through. Who has time to be measuring the amount of water they take per day, right? The same applicable to developers. Developers write so much code. They have to think about logics and what function should I use? Try to remember the function you wrote. I mean, they think in that. Permit me to say that they think in binary. It's either something goes well or it doesn't, right? And for us as product managers, we don't think in binary. We think in possibilities. So we think beyond the case of good or bad, or yes or no. We look at what we call edge cases, like scenarios that are not normal. Okay, what ifs? We ask all the what ifs, right? Developers in most times don't, and that's why they oftentimes need a product manager to do justice to that part for them. Now, when a product manager has not come up with the whole requirement, earlier we have discussed about user stories spoken about acceptance criteria. When you break down your acceptance criteria and you create a ticket, put those information in it, and then you tell the developer to work on it. Now, because developers are binary, they look at that document, two set of developers that you would have, or designers that you have. You have one person, one of them, one set, very detailed. I have one of them in my team. They read the description to the latter, right? Before this my current company, I'd never had a developer that reads documentation line by line. But then I met him. I had another one before in this my company. I had another one before he left. It was that like he reads it to the point of they reach out to you and say, Michael, is this a mistake? I see that you wrote here. So it's not a mistake. So how does it work? Right. So they reach the end. Those are, are really one in my team. Right. His attention to detail is very crazy. He would even before he reads, he tries to understand your POV, and then he reads it. He doesn't even act like a developer most of the time. I tell him in the call with every other person that one person in this particular team that everybody agrees that he doesn't act like a software engineer is this guy, and everybody agrees, right? Everybody in my team agrees because he doesn't think in binary. He thinks beyond it. Like why you're giving him his taxes, he's not just saying, oh, this is my tax, let me go and get it done. He's also thinking about what are the edge cases? What is the worst that would happen? Like, how do I handle this or that? Right? Michael, this thing that you're saying would affect us, right? Or it will affect the user. I feel like the experience will be better. He asks the why. He wants to know why you are doing it that way, right? But not every developer or designer thinks that way. Most of them believes that product managers are meant to do the thinking, the ideation, and all of that, and then just dump the work for them to do. So, which means that even though we have worked on the part, user story and acceptance criteria, and we have seen the vision before the whole thing came to being, right? Luckily, have vibe code makes it easy for us to visualize our work. I'll give you an example. Let me just show you a randomized example. Orchestration. Yeah. I was showing one of my developers a new widget I wanted to add to my app today, which is called the. By the way, all of these that you're looking at is AI generated. So I was showing him this today, and I was like, oh yeah, guy, we'll be able to add a loop. We're adding a loop functionality where you have stuff within it and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh, this is nice, and and after this is nice, that was just all, right? Before now, we didn't have visualization like this. We didn't have a system that allows us to visualize. So what we did was we imagined it in our head, such that when the developers are now done, we are also seeing it for the first time. So at that time, testing was utmostly required. So you have to look, and that's why we have a role called product owner. You have to look at what they deliver. So usually in every organization, there's a workflow. So the workflow is a task is from to do, it gets to in progress. After in progress, usually it goes to code review or design review. After code review or design review, it gets merged or approved, so to say, and then it goes into testing. After testing, your QA tester tests it and say, okay, this is good to go. And then it goes to PO review. PO in this case is you, which is you as a product owner. You review it that does this meet my requirement, right? So what we'll be discussing today is that testing phase and the PO review. So yes, you have, like I said, you have written the requirement, but you can't just trust that everything is done. You can't trust that this task that was done has not actually affected another part of the system, right? You can't trust that X or Y that has been done will not affect another side of the system. So you just have to know that okay, if I, for example, as a product manager is assigning a task to my developers, I need to be sure that this particular task or the requirement for the task is met. And that's why we have acceptance criteria, that each of my acceptance criteria is duly met and it doesn't affect other things, right? This brings me to the type of testings that we have. Like I said, today's class will be very short. I'll just probably take questions from you. And something we'll call unit testing. Unit testing is, I'll use the analogy we'll be using since before class. All of you remember this, right? The presentation no go rather that we used last time. All right, so remember that it has different parts, right? Unit testing means that I test part one separately, test part two. I'll test each part of it separately before I bring it together. So I can also use another example, like in the case of phones that they used to make before we now have all these phones that everything is all together. Before you have your memory card separate, you have your battery separate, everything can be dismantled from each other. When you are ready to use the phone, you now combine it together, right? So this is ideal, right? In not case, that's what testing unit testing means. So you test individual component of a system before you now test it together. I'll give another example of computer. Before we had laptops, we had desktops, right? So you have the CPU, you have the mouse, you have the keyboard, you have the monitor, you have speakers, the regular setup of a computer set before now, right? So when they call unit testing, it means that I will test the screen separately to be sure that the screen works the way it should work. I'll test the mouse separately to be sure that the mouse is working the way it should work. And then I'll test again almost every other component to be sure that they all work the way they should work, right? And then when I test and I realize that okay, everything works the way they should work, bam, then I'll push that out for what's the word now? For integration testing. Now, integration testing is now that I have tested everything individually and they work together. I need to connect them together to ensure that they work together. Again, remember I said in the case of a computer, you test the screen to be sure that it works. Or maybe computer, for some of us, we didn't use desktop during our days. We grew up using laptops or the likes. Maybe you are a rich kid. Let's use the example of your TV at home, right? You connect your TV to your DSTV or um to your game console or to your DVD player or whatever it is you connect your television to, right? So initially, what it's saying is I need to be able to test my TV without this DSTV to be sure that my TV is working fine, and then test my DSTV to ensure that it is working fine, and then test my speakers to ensure that they are working fine. If I notice that all of them are working fine, then I bring all of them together, connect it together, and check again if they are working fine. That's what we call integration testing. So again, to go back a bit, unit testing is testing individual parts of a product or a system in isolation. And then integration testing means that you bring them together now, the way they should work, and then test them together. All right. Also, we have end-to-end testing. End-to-end testing now is now that I know that all of them work together. Now let me start testing the features, right? Another example of that I will give is, for example, my speaker. The speaker in my sitting room has a surround system. So what surround system means is I don't know if you both of you, if any of us, some of us are not be club people, right? But maybe some of us, maybe we attend events like weddings, or some of us go to church and they play loud music. Usually, you notice that there's speakers everywhere, right? You have speakers on the right, speakers on the left, sometimes speakers at the back, right? What surround system means is that sound can move through all of these guys at the same time, giving an illusion that the sound is not coming from the speaker. So, in a summary, it means that I can disconnect this speaker and you only be hearing from this speaker. I can disconnect this speaker and you only be hearing from these two speakers, right? Something like that. So surround system allows you to move sound. And now we have something called 3D, 4D sounds, which means that I can be hearing the sound move around the hall, right? So I know that my speakers have that functionality, right? Now, I have done individual tests. I can hear that the speaker sounds. I have tested with my TV. I can hear that whatever I play on my TV is coming out of the speaker. But now I want to test the functionality of the speaker itself. I want to test if it actually has surround. I remember the day I brought my speaker, like I was like a baby, when you when you give baby sweets, right? I wanted to feel that 3D sound that people talk about, right? And I had to go to YouTube. I remember I searched YouTube and searched for that 3D sounds, and I got them, and then played the sound, and I could literally feel the sound move from one speaker to another, right? Some of us feel this maybe when listening to some music with quality headsets. You just feel like maybe there's a drum roll, yeah, and it sounds like it moves from this ear to this other ear, right? I wanted to have that experience again. I'm not testing if the speaker works again now. I'm not testing if my TV works again. I am just really testing the functionality that the speaker has. So now I'm testing beyond if they work. I know they work together. Now I need to know if the other functionality that they promise actually works. I mean, I can also now test the remote button, right? Like the volumes. I can test the volumes. Can I increase it? Can I reduce it? Usually speakers have equalizers. So where you can change the bars, you can change the treble, I want to test if those things also work. That's what we call end-to-end testing. So now to go again, unit testing is testing a system in parts, individual part of a system in isolation. Integration testing is you combine all of them together and test that they actually work together. And then end-to-end testing is every feature that is supposed to be experienced, you test them properly. And now we now have regression testing. Now, regression testing is usually, let's say, let me give an example. I'm trying to see if I can use the same example of the TV set and everything. Good. Let's say you've tested your speakers and everything worked fine, right? And then you have another set, right? Let's assume I'll give an example of my headset. My mouse and my keyboard can connect to 3 devices at the same time. So all I have to just do is context switching. There's a button here that allows me to switch between devices. In my keyboard as well, there is a button. It can connect to 3 devices at the same time. So there's a button 1, 2, 3. So if I'm using on one device, I can switch to 2 and then look at another laptop and be working on it with the same keyboard, right? That's the functionality of the keyboard. Now, let's assume I've tested the functionality of the keyboard, which means the keyboard can now work with multiple devices. Now, I want to bring in another device. This device could be my headset. Let's assume before I didn't have my headset, I just had my speaker, my what do they call the name now? My keyboard and my mouse. They are Bluetooth devices, and I have multiple setup in front of me right now. I have the MacBook and I have the Windows laptop, right? And usually I use the same keyboard and mouse for them. Now I have headsets. The headset also have the capability to switch between devices because maybe I'm doing multiple job. Again, maybe I'm doing multiple job. And because I'm doing multiple jobs, I can have a meeting in company A and have a meeting in company B. And maybe after I finish a meeting in company B, company A is calling me into another meeting. And I don't want to have to be disconnecting from here and connecting from here. I just want to connect at the same time and just switch context. Now, I have tried that with my keyboard and mouse, and it works very well, flawlessly, right? In fact, I don't have to move from my decks. My keyboard stays where it is, my mouse stays where it is, the 2 laptops stay where they are. And when I'm done in this, I just probably just press 2 on my keyboard. Sorry, there's a 1, 2, 3 button here that shows direction. So I just put 2 on my keyboard, and the keyboard no longer works for this laptop. It now works for this other one. And when I'm looking at this other one, I am able to interact with it. I've tested that. It works well. That's what I call integration. And end-to-end testing means that the functionality is working fine. But now I brought in another device, which is the headset. I tested the headset again. I have to follow the same process. I tested the SS separately, it works. I tested it with this system, it works. I tested all the features of the headsets, volume and everything to see that it works. It works fine. Now I need to test because I'm bringing a foreign what do they call it now? A foreign feature or a foreign device or another addition to my current setup. Now I need to actually test my previous setup to be sure that this new setup is not affecting the previous setup. So when I test this new setup, I use my headset. There's a button here on my headset as well that allows me to switch between devices in case I want to do it manually. But usually the headset does it manually itself. For example, once I'm done with a call here, I end the call, another call starts here. Once I join this call, my headset switch from this laptop to that laptop itself automatically. Now, but let's assume I don't want the automatic settings. I've set it. I say I want to do is context switching, and I've set it up. But this also does context switching. I've set this up. I've tested. It works fine. I need to be able to decide that, guy, what I used before, does it still work fine? That is what we call regression. So I have tested end to end this new device or this new feature that I've brought in, but I need to be sure that the of this new feature, right? That is what we call regression. So now that I've tested the new feature, it works fine. Now I have to test the entire system together to be sure that all of them works as they should at the same time, right? That's what we call regression. Smoke testing is, I can't use the example I was using before for smoke testing, so I'll use I'll use the example of the uh, software example, because smoke testing is applicable in software environment alone. I've not seen it used in hardware environment, so I can't use hardware. So for those of us that probably don't understand software concepts, sorry, you have to understand it now. All right, so smoke test is exactly what we call regression test, but in different environments, right? Smoke test is a sanity check you do in production after your release. Usually, some product managers believe that regression is done in production, but I think it's a misuse of word. Regression is you do it in lower environments, and then when you get to production, you've pushed this code, you have tested units, you've tested the new code you have, you've tested it with the old code, and then you've tested all the feature end to end, and everything looks fine, right? Now, you've tested everything, it looks fine. Then you say, okay, hey guys, let's release. By now, you guys know what release is. And I hope you guys are understanding the reason why I arranged the course this way. Because if I had done this earlier, I won't have been able to talk about release. Do you understand? So you guys know what release is. So when you release that particular product now in a different environment, that means the product is now in production environment. The question now begins, does it work well in a new environment? Does it work well with the user? So that's what we call smoke test. So it's smoke test because it's a small sanity check, right? Or we can call it sanity test as well. But usually it's called smoke test. Nobody calls it sanity test, but your developers might call it sanity test. Your QA might call it sanity test, but the standard name for it is smoke test. So which means I'm doing the same thing I did in regression in lower environments. I do it again in production to be sure that all the systems are working together as they should. And remember when I was talking about rollback. So when you are doing your smoke text and you find the issue, usually that's when the rollback conversation comes in. We need to roll back this feature before it go and affect more customers than we anticipate. And then now the final test. The final test happens between regression and smoke test. And it happens in a specific environment. This does not happen in everywhere. It doesn't happen everywhere. And that's why I said for the first 2 years of my career as a product manager, I didn't have any experience with it because I didn't work with a company that does UAT. UAT is a unique type of testing that requires real users. Some companies bastardize UAT. They use their internal users as real users, like their staffs are the real users, but that's not the way it should work. You have to select. I spoke to you guys earlier about something we call co-building, where you select a few of your users who would be part of your system. Then when you release new features out, these your users will be on this environment. It's also a production environment, but for those users, I already told you how we do the context switching. So please don't ask me because I already told you guys how we do A/B testing. I already told you how we do feature flags. So you can understand how this happens. So UAT is that test that is handled by real users, maybe not your entire user, a certain percentage of your users that you have selected to actually test it. Like I said, in some organizations, um, is their staffs, right? That's why I put all representatives of the user. So it's their staffs that do it. So they just have some staff. It can be customer support. It can be people. You just call them and say, please, guys, use this functionality. Check our app. We'll use it. All of us will use it for the next 1 week, and then we'll give feedback on it before we actually roll it out to the user, right? In fact, some companies compulsory it that their employees use. For example, I know a fintech in Nigeria that forces their staffs to use their app, right? Obviously most fintech pay your salary into the company's account. However, they allow you to be able to move it out. It's not compulsory. You use the company's app to transact to do your everyday transaction. But this particular fintech, I will not mention their name, they force their staffs to use. If you are working with us, then all your transaction has to happen in our system. Like I mean, if you we should see at least one airtime, at least, so they have like yardstick a way they estimate it. Of course, they know you can send money out, but they have a way they estimate it. So this set of their customers are their UAT. So they are those customers that will perform the UAT and give feedback based on what they've experienced before it is now pushed to the general populace. I hope you understand all the type of testing now, right? Now, beyond the testing, there's something we call environment. We'll still talk about it when we start talking about APIs, data, deployment, scaling, and all that. There's something we call environment. Environment is basically environments. Environment is location. Think of it like locations. I think it makes more sense as environment. I don't know how to explain it again. So software development or software tools that we build are are living in environments. I'll just give it that way. They are living in certain places. It's just like when you have your flash drive, right? You have your laptop and then you have your phone. Now imagine that you have a folder, right? This folder, you call it like your, maybe the folder has some of your best songs, or maybe you're a writer and it has some of your best write-ups and you don't want to lose them. So on your phone, we can say that your phone, for example, is an environment. Your flash is another environment. Your laptop is another environment that contains this folder that we are talking about. However, when you have another note, you would have to move from one environment to the other. Usually, if it's based on the example I give right now, you most likely probably you start writing your notes or your book, your new write-up on your laptop. So that's your, would say ideally, that's your testing environment, like your first environment where you write the book that you want to write. In the case of software building, is code. That first place where you write the code. It can be your laptop. Usually we call it local environment. So you are writing your code and everything in that particular environment. And then once you're done in that environment, you say, oh, I think I'm good to go. I think I'm good to go. Then you now move it to a more secure environment, right? This can be, oh, let's assume um, where you were working at, where you were working on it before was your brother's laptop or your, I don't know, you don't have a laptop. So a more secure place for you would be maybe on your phone, right? And then you move it to your phone. Now that it's on your phone, you check it well and say, okay, is everything intact? Yes, everything is intact. Then you now move it to your Google Drive, which Google Drive could be your final destination. This final destination can be maybe, for example, your production environment when it comes to coding. So the same thing with our applications, your website and everything. When companies build, they have environments. So the developer's laptop is called a local environment, and then the developer will push the code. Sorry. So the developer will test this. You won't hear me again because this is connected. Okay. All right. Can you guys hear me now? My check, please.
Yeah,
If you can hear me.
can.
Okay, lovely. Sorry, a call came in and my Bluetooth is connected to my phone, so it will prioritize my phone. All right. So again, as I was saying, those are environment ideally. You when your developer now, like when they are done writing the code and doing everything on their coding on their environment, they now move to your, it can be staging. Some company call it staging environment, some company call it integrations environment. And why is it called integration environment? I've explained it to you guys. The integration environment is integration testing is that testing that you do where you connect my own code as a developer. A company has 4 engineers. So me, I'm working on a code. Another engineer is working on another code. All of us come together to test our codes together, right? So that's why I call it integration environment. Some people call it staging environment because ideally the idea of that environment is to ensure that the changes are made that I tested in my local that works very fine. I need to now test where everybody is also putting their bits to be sure that it works well with other people's changes, right? So this environment, this integration or staging environment is usually where your QA test, not usually your developers themselves test. And then some companies now have another environment where we call pre-production environment. There are other names that companies call it, but just know that this environment, this pre-production environment, is that environment where your QA, your quality assurance person, or your software developer, engineer in test writes the automation test, where they actually test manually to ensure that this code actually works. Again, like I said, in your integration environment or staging environment, the responsibility of test lies on your developer because they're the one that push the beans. They should test the beans and be sure that it works fine before moving it to the pre-production environment. Right? Is there an emergency? Sorry, give me a minute. All right. Do you understand? So that is how that ideally works, right? This is the class. Oh, the class. Sorry, I didn't know that you could not join. All right. So again, uh, Jennifer has been trying to join. I didn't see her request, or I can't see her request really. Nkechi. So maybe you can send her this link. Uh, I should actually give her a call. I've not been able to. I've not had time to call her. It has been a very busy day for me. Please send her the link. All right. So again, like I said, you have that environment as integration environment because everybody comes together. You already know what integration testing is now. Everybody comes together to test their code to ensure that it works together with each other, right? And then your QA engineer, quality assurance engineer, and even you as a PO, you are the one that handles the end-to-end test and the regression test. Obviously, your developers in those environments also handles all of this. They ensure that they handle this, but usually what you do, you don't do integration tests because it doesn't make any sense. So what you do really is end-to-end test, ensure that everything works together, right? And then you do a bit of regression, those things that you know that works before, you ensure that it's still working, right? And that happens on the pre-prod environment. Some companies don't have pre-prod environment, they just have local staging environment. Now they have UAT and production, right? So, but developed companies or global companies that I've worked with, and some of my friends work with, usually they have that kind of environment. They have the integration environment, the pre-prod environment, and the production environment. So they used to have at least 3 environments that the company manages. The local environment is managed by developer themselves. Nothing concern us with that one. But the integration environment, pre-prod and production environments, three environments that are very, very essential for any software development organization. And you as a product manager, in this case, would most likely test in the pre-prod environment and in the production environment. Why? Because pre-prod environments used to have less bins, right? There's usually no problem because before it gets to pre-prod environments, the problem would have been caught by your developer and you would have fixed it before time. Usually, you have a lot of companies. If you've worked as a product manager in companies before that don't have this environment, you oftentimes have more issues in production because they've not been able to validate. And when you're testing, you're always seeing plenty bugs because your developer don't have a place to actually test themselves, like to test their code with other system. It's the same environment that you are testing. So usually when your developers say, "Oh, I've moved the code," that's when you are testing. It shouldn't be. Your developers should move their code to an environment, test it with other developers' code to ensure that it works fine before now telling you that, "Hey, Michael, I'm done with the testing. It works fine. Can I move to pre-prod environment?" Say, "Yeah, move. I'll test it as well." So they move it to pre-prod environment for you. And this time, everybody's not just pushing the code anyhow they want. No, only the person that is approved to move things to pre-prod is moving things to pre-prod. So the changes are not voluminous. You're not saying, who cooked beans? You know who cooked the beans, and the person that cooked the beans can come and repair it. Again, for those of us that don't know cook beans, in the tech space is one of the slang that we use for when somebody have pushed rubbish, right? Pushed rubbish code. So when you hear a developer say somebody cooked beans, especially in the Nigerian space, I don't hear it often in global companies, but in the Nigerian space, all the Nigerians that I've worked with, they are always talking about beans. But in global companies I've worked with, I really don't hear that term a lot, right? But I'm giving you the term so that when you hear it, you're not surprised. All right, so those are the type of testings that we have. Who writes the test cases? Not you. It's your quality assurance officers that write the test cases. What did you call the second environment? Did you say no. Integration environment or staging environment. Okay, so that's the first environment. The second environment is pre-production. Right? It's called pre-production environments. Pre-production environments. So we shorten to pre-prod. So that means before production, an environment before production, right? Pre-production environment. Your companies can call it different name, but the idea is it's an environment before the code gets to production, right? That's the idea. All right. Who writes the test cases? Test cases are written by your QA and reviewed by you, right? Your QA does not just write test cases and say it's done. No, they write test cases, send it to you, you review it and approve it. If your QA is not doing that, they are doing it wrongly. If you are not approving and reading their test cases, then you also are doing it wrongly. So as a product manager, you don't just test when they say test. No, you write acceptance criteria and user stories. That acceptance criteria is meant to be taken by your QA. The way your developer is taking it and writing code, and your designer is taking it and using it to design. Your QA is supposed to take that your acceptance criteria, write test scripts based on it, improve it, because they have more. They are always fishy people. They can see things that you are not seeing. That's why they are in that role. So when they are now done, when they have done their writing their test case, they give it to you. You review it and say, okay, something is missing, something is not missing, because usually these test cases is what is used to validate if you are ready for production or not. So usually if you have 10 test cases, your QA would tell you maybe 8/10 of them passed, right? You can check the 2 that didn't pass and say, okay, is this what not going to production or not, right? So usually that's the case. So you don't write test cases, but you review them. And what are the components of a test case? Number one, you have test case ID. There's always an ID that defines what it could be. For example, let's assume you are building a feature called transfer. It could be transfer 101, transfer 102, transfer 103, right? Your QA can decide what the ID would look like. There's a description, what are we testing? And then there's a precondition. Precondition is what has to happen before a user can test this. Precondition could for a transfer feature could be that a user must have an account, a user must have been verified, a user must have, those kind of things are preconditions. And then you have the test steps. So the user logs into their platform, goes to the dashboard, see the transfer button, clicks on the transfer button, those steps are tests. And then expected result. I already explained this yesterday when we were talking about incident. Expected result, and then actual result, and then status, right? So why do we have expected result and actual result in test case? We had it because your QA might be expecting something else and see something else. So when they are recording the results, they need to be able to put it there that, hey, this was what I was actually expecting based on your documentation, but this was what I saw. And then they can actually give a note that, aside from status, they can give a note and say, okay, I think you should check this. Maybe the actual results is what is supposed to be the expected. And then at the end of the day, they tell you this passed or this failed or this is blocked because I cannot. The QA might be blocked as well. It might be blocked because they cannot test. Maybe because they are, for example, let's assume what they are testing is an iOS, is a iPhone feature, and the company has not given them an iPhone. They can say that this particular feature is blocked at the moment for them to test. So, which means you as a product manager, your core responsibility is to unblock everybody. You now then find a way to unblock them, right? All right. I give an example here. UAT testing. What do you do when you are doing user acceptance testing, right? Number one, prepare a document. Document is very important in everything we do. And then what does that document really looks like? It's just you. Prepare a test environment. I'll talk about document later. Prepare a test environment, which means an environment that would allow them to actually test it. Basically, your UAT. Again, in some company, this is called pre-prod environment. In some company, it's just say production, and then they use feature flag to determine who has it or who doesn't have it. And then number two, define your scenarios. So you have to give them like scenarios, what you want them to test. You put it in documentation that you give, basically. And then recruit right testers. Usually, like I said, your top clients should be your case. Those people that at least desire it. Sometimes it's not even your top client. Sometimes it's those customers that really asked for that feature. Usually, let me give you a trick that we do. When we validate ideas, what we do is we talk to customers or clients and say, "Hey guys, I want to build this particular feature. What do you think about it?" But again, we don't go directly like that. For example, I'll give you an example of a way we ask those questions so that we don't set them up, right? Because some customers don't know what they want. So if you tell them something, they will tell you, yes, that's what I want. So in most cases, we ask them questions like, okay, what do you think we can improve regarding this particular feature? How we heard that this feature is actually causing you strain. What do you think? What exactly is it about this feature that concerns you, right? So you know, we are more diplomatic in our questions. We don't just tell them, "Oh, I'm trying to add a blue button that will make your problems go away," and they say, "Ah, yes, please add it." And at the end of the day, their problem did not go away, right? So we ask the question in the right way. But now, when you validate, which is the initial step before you even start building at all, when you validate, you take the details of those customers down. At the end of your questions and answer that you have when you are validating, you ask the question: if we build a solution before we push it out to the customer, are you willing to be one of the first few people that will test with us? So you already recruit them at that particular time. So when you are ready, you are just going to them and say, "Oh, remember that problem we spoke about? We have a solution for it, but we want you to test first before we push it out to other people." Number one, they feel very important. At the same time, it helps you validate that the problem is solved in a way that your regular staffs would not have validated it for you. All right. Brief your testers correctly. Like I said, usually, if you brief them from the start when you are validating, by the time you want to test, you don't need plenty shalaye. You just remind them of what you're trying to test. Then document findings systematically, right? Document what are the if they come to you and say, "Oh, this is what happened," it's okay. What happened? How did you? Usually, I have a template, and the template is what did you do? Expected outcome and actual outcome. What were you expecting to happen? Then what actually happened? And then how bad is it for you on a scale of 1 to 10? Right? In most cases, sometimes on a scale of 1 to 5. And then when you document all of this, you can decide if yes, we should go with that feature or we should not go with it. Then some of this feedback would give birth to other features for you and all of that at the end of the day. All right, as is my practice, I also wrote a bit on how mangoes use UAT. I'll still talk about this later, but let me just speak about it now. Before we go, in some companies we have test environment, we push to staging environment, then pilot test environment. Yes, like I said, some companies call it different names. So pilot test environment can be your pre-production. In that companies or in those companies, you have 4 environments. That's good, right? The more the environment you have, basically, the better the chance of not having bug pushed to your customers. If your developers have a very strict practice, right? Strict practice. By the way, we have some of these top companies don't have multiple environments. They have just 2 environments. Some of them just 2 environments, but they have a very crazy culture, very strict culture. You push something that is based to production, you lose your job. There's no plenty talk to it, right? So, but at the end of the day, I believe, based on experience, that the more the environment you have, the better for you. So your company has just 2 environments, you probably want to beg them to get another environment. It's more cost eventually for the company, but at the end of the day, it's good for you, right? They can scale the first 2 environment down, like the staging environment can be scaled down, so the resources that is consuming is not much, and then the last 2 environments can look alike. So your pre-prod environment, for example, the pilot test that you mentioned, Innocent, is a UAT. That's why you call it pilot test. Is UAT environment. Now, that UAT environment has to have exactly the same resources that production environment has in most cases. Like that means it has to have the same speed, the same uptime, the same everything. It's not that I'm testing in production, everything is fast, but when I'm testing UAT, it's slow. No, it should have the same, almost exactly the same experience. The only difference should be the feature that you are adding on it. That's the cherry on top of it. All right. I mentioned something yesterday that one of our responsibility as product managers, especially when we have incidents or when we are doing testings like this, is to monitor. We call it system monitoring. So we have platforms like Grafana, we have Sentry, we have Kibana. In my company, we use the 3, but some companies also have more. What exactly are they? They are platforms that keep records of your system health. For example, I can't show you my company Grafana, so I'll just show you screenshot from internet. Open image in new tab. Right. For example, here you can see your server performance. Right. You can see there's a spike on this day. You can investigate why is there a spike. What's happening? Why is everybody like for example your CPU performance? You can see there are days where there is huge spike. We call it spike, like when it's right, huge spike. Your CPU usage is green, but your other thing is also not looking good, right? This basically helps you to know what your system is saying per time. Let me look for one that is at least looking like a matrix. FID. Look for something that you guys will understand when you look at it. FCP. Anyway. All right. So just look at this, right? You can see 147 error. Some of the ones you might not understand, but just flow with me. This is what some of those logs, basic dashboards looks like. It helps you know when there's a problem, right? For example, here it's showing there's a spike in your data, but it didn't just start at this point. You already see that if you are looking at the logs frequently, right, you would already see that something is happening, something is wrong, blah, 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 blah. And then some of this platform has something we call alerts, right? So when something is going beyond the average, it alerts you that, something is going wrong, so that you can go and check it, right? For example, this is page load. Like how long does it take for a page on our website to load, right? You can see that the average on this website, they have 3, right? But then the average on this website is around less than 2.5 seconds. But there was a particular day that it was almost 1 minute. That's 30 seconds. So which means that it will start growing. If I was the product manager for this product, I will speak with my development team to create alerts at 10 seconds. So that if anything goes beyond 10 seconds, we are alerted and we can actually look into it as soon as possible to resolve it. Right. So this is Grafana. We have Sentry as well. All of them are basically the same, but Jesus, that's not, you are not what I'm looking for. You are not what I'm looking for. All right, so Sentry is also but let me look for one that looks like it's like a actual log. Aha, aha. All right, so Sentry logs is also a log that basically tells you what is happening in your system per time, and then you can look in depth to see what is going on. For example, let's assume let me give you a scenario where I use Sentry a lot. I have an integration with another company called Web Engage or Mo Engage. I have a lot of them. Now, what this integration does is these partners, they send requests to our system to help them deliver it to Meta, because my company has direct partnership with Meta. So which means that when these companies they don't have direct partnership, so they use us to help their merchants to send WhatsApp messages to their customers. So they send requests to us and then it goes to it. We don't have a dashboard for it because those companies already have a dashboard that they use to show the customer, oh, okay, 1,000 messages were sent, 800 of them were delivered, or 1,000 of them were delivered, and only 800 of them was seen by the customer. Those kind of metrics, right? But let's assume, because we don't have a dashboard internally, because we don't need it, they need it more. So we don't have a dashboard internally. We just help them, give them an API, then it goes through. When they reach out to me and say, "Hey, Michael, we sent a traffic and we don't know what is going on. We can't see. Like there's a bug. I sent 1 million messages, but I can't even know. I don't even know if they were actually delivered or not. It's showing 0 on my end." So what I do usually before I go and meet my developers is I confirm. I come here and confirm whether they actually sent it or not. Because yes, on their end it might not show, right? Because if there is an error, it might not necessarily show on their end. There are some errors that we show, but there are some errors that might not show because we are not actually printing it. Maybe it's a new type of error that we didn't consider before, right? So it's easy. All you have to do is just search by a parameter that you are aware of. For example, in the case of my own, I can tell them to give me a sample number, although we don't print numbers directly in the logs because of compliance reason, but we print half of the number. So we encrypt some part of the numbers. So I can take part of those numbers that I know that is encrypted, that is not encrypted, and then search here. As you can see here, all environment in the last 24 hours that has this particular parameter, sentry.message or parameter.transaction ID. So if you see all these messages that you are seeing, it has been filtered by only logs that have transaction ID. So if I know what it can even be the template name, right? The WhatsApp template name or the message content, right? I can just come here and say that has this message content in it, or that has this message in the content, and then to bring me all the message, I can see the count, right? How many of them actually happened, right? When was it sent? I can confirm it was sent here. Then if it's not sent, I tell them no, we didn't receive any request. Check your system. Oh yeah, we received request. And then I start checking, and if I can't find the root cause, I bring my developer in and say, so I'm able to tell my developers with boldness that guy, they sent us 5 million transactions and 5 million messages, but none of them were actually processed, right? And he says, well, how do you know they send us? It's in the logs, right? So this is why we actually do. I can count the number of time I go to the log every day that I don't necessarily have to open a ticket to my team. And this saves them a lot of time. A lot of time. They know. In fact, sometimes when they want to come in, they will say, Mike, are you free? Because they know most of the time I'm busy looking at the logs or attending to customers or shouting at each other in love, right? So, um, which brings me back to that conversation I had with you the last time. That one quality thing you should do is you need to help your developers or people you work with get more confidence in your ability to help them, right? I mean, the regular conversations I have with my developers is not usually, Michael, what do you even do? What do you do? Uh-uh. It's a matter of, Michael, are you available? Can you help me? Because they know the number of burden I take off them, right? Which helps, right? Sometimes I don't because I'm also busy with other things. I just call someone of them and say, hey guys, I'm actually in a meeting trying to help the customer with something. Can you please help me check this as soon as possible? They don't think about it twice because they know that I would not bring it to them if it was not essential, right? So how do you learn all of this? Again, it doesn't happen over time, right? It takes practice. By the way, some of these platforms used to be free. I don't know if it's still free now. Let me see. Grafana, Tuesday, Grafana. Yeah, you see, you can get started for free. And I'm sure they have free data that you can just play around with. Like, you can open Grafana. Recently, I actually opened an account with PostOrg as well, just to check. This is how I learned most of this platform. Nobody in the company will come and sit down with you and say, yeah, this is how you use it, this is how you use it. In your leisure, right? Learn how to use this platform practically. If you probably get stuck, some of my mentees used to come to me. Like I had one today that said she needed 30 minutes. I just took some time off work to help her, right? In your leisure, maybe you are trying to do something and it doesn't make sense. Like when she came, what she needed help with was she was trying to do, we call it question on Metabase. Metabase is like your database, but for product managers and people that are not very technical. So instead of saying queries, we have questions, right? So it's a way we ask the questions that it knows what query to go and ask in the DB. So she was trying to formulate a question and it was not working well. She knew the data was there, but it was not giving her the data. She just called me, and what we thought was going to be 30 minutes, we spent about 5-10 minutes and we fixed it. So I'm saying that carry yourself before you come and say me, I should carry you. Don't come and meet me and say, come and teach me the entire Grafana. I will not, right? The purpose of this course is to open your mind or your heart to what is available in the market, how to upskill yourself such that you can present yourself valuable to those that actually want to employ you at the end of the day. So again, don't come and meet me and say, come and teach me how to use Grafana or tools, anything tools. Please learn it on your own. All right. Ignore my different things. All right, so we have some of these things that we use, and what are the key metrics that we check out for? Like I said, availability and uptime, right? Availability means that how fast is our system, or is our system even available to the user at all? Like, is our system able to access it? How many downtime do we have every year, right? Those kind of things. Error rates. I showed you one board right now that shows 78 error. So you can calculate if you have 1,000 requests and you have, or let's say you have 100 requests and you have just 2 errors. That's 2% of your entire traffic is full of error. That's a problem, right? Every company is trying to make sure that they have 99.9% accuracy. So anything less than that, I'm sorry. That's why they call it P99 or P95. Some companies say P95, but my company is P99. It should be 95, 99%. Anything below that, there should be an alert in your system, right? In tech, we believe that there's no 100%. Like your system cannot be 100% functional. There are people that will be at the ground, but it should be that 0.1% of your users, not more than that, right? 0.01, sorry, percent of your users, not more than that. So this brings me to throughput. Means basically how many requests can your system take per second? Like how many, for example, requests could be let me give it in the case of real life, right? How many punch can you take before you die? Right? That's what we call throughput. In the case of systems as well, API requests to those systems are like punch, right? How many of it can it take per second before it dies off, right? That's throughput. P99, like I said, is the response time. Error rates. We have a lot of more like that, depending on the product you're working on. If you're in fintech, if you're in prop tech, if you're in whatever industry you are, there are some metrics that will be specific to that industry as well. So when you get there, just make sure all you have to do is Tell your developers, I need alert system. I need alert system. We need to check our health. We need to have a status page. But aside from the status page, internally, we need to have a way to check these errors, to see this how our system is doing, login, performance, monitoring. We call it monitoring and login. So you can always bring that conversation up in case the company does not have it. And if the company have this, they will give you access to it so that you can also look at it. And please don't be like me. Any company you work, don't collect right access to any tool. So every tool has two kind of access. We have read and write access. Write access means that you can take actions like delete, like edit something, like as a product manager, you don't need write access to any technical tool. It is none of your concern. What you need is read access, ability to be able to open a page, filter, those kind of things, right? You don't need access to add data there or. So if they say, oh, well, Michael, no problem, we will just give you access, you improve. No, even if you know how to improve it, don't take the access to improve it. And this is very important because it's not your role to bring up all those data or fine tune it. It's not your work. Your work is to look at it sometimes and see, okay, what is the performance of my app? If there's a problem, raise it to the regular quarters and then they will fix it. Do you understand? All right. I think this brings us to the end of the class. I told you we will not be doing plenty talking today. So do we have any questions so far? Any questions? Tomorrow, please make sure that everybody joins with their laptop. Please join with your laptop. Stay in a place that you can put on your cameras. Make sure your mic is actually working well. So join the class early, do mic check, right? So that because we'll be having practicals tomorrow, I'll teach very briefly and then we'll go into practicals. Everybody will share their screen at one point or the other. So please come with your laptops. If you say you are not with your laptop, this is a problem I will have with you. If you come and say, I don't have my laptop with me, we are not, like, there's no going back. I'm telling everybody now, you are going out of the program because before you joined, I asked everybody, do you have a device that you can use to join classes? I hope that works. All right. Any question? I should have stopped the recording, Seth.